Good morning. Apparently we're live. I hope you're well. I hope the storms, all the storms, haven't been giving you a hard time. Now, I'm live early because, as we've all come to realize, there's technical stuff. There's technical stuff all the time. So, there was a really, really frightening set of tornadoes the other day. And when you watch the weather updates, when you hear that they stayed on the ground for miles and miles, when you discover that whole towns, whole cities have been flattened, it makes you stop and blink and wonder how that's even possible. I mean, we heard they were coming. We heard they would be bad, but we didn't scale bad the way they turned out to be. And what I want to talk about today, when everyone joins us, is the effect on us of prevailing winds. You know, when you see trees in a neighborhood and all the branches and the tree itself, they all seem to be leaning in one direction. Well, unless you're living on the side of a mountain, which could be a reason, the fact is that that's the way the wind blows. And it's the way the wind blows every day, awake and asleep. So the tree, all the trees, have no choice really. That's just the way they grow. They grow leaning, being pushed by those winds, by those prevailing winds. And as they grow older, they just keep growing that way because they don't know any better. They don't know any different. If you see a tree growing beside a very big tree, and the very big tree is consuming all the sunlight, the smaller tree will grow out and away from the canopy of the big tree to try and get some sun. If you cut the big tree down, the smaller tree doesn't really know what to do. It will correct itself eventually, but gradually, very, very gradually, over years and years and years, because its programming, its wiring, its people like us do things like this, trees like us do things like this, was formed early on. And there was no other message coming down the pike. So everyone in that tree, all the systems in that tree said, we do it this way. Trees like us grow like this. And what I think I saw happening during the storm was people unable to shift out of, well, maybe we don't do it like this. If you know a deadly storm is coming, and they said deadly, then maybe don't hunker down at home. We can't leave. It's all we have. My whole family has lived here. Okay, but not after tonight, Josephine. And stuff can always be found again. We can always rebuild. We can always start again. Military brat here. We can always start again. Is it going to be exactly the same as before? No, and maybe that's a good thing. Are we capable of starting again? Of course we are. We're resilient. We're survivors. This is what people do. We go to bed every night. We start again in the morning. And I think that if we aren't presented with surprises, if we only ever have one prevailing wind, then that's not only the way we're formed, but it's the way we feel safe. It's the way we grow. It's the way we want to be, because people like us. I have all my friends. I don't want to leave, says the person standing in the face of an oncoming gale, right? And you say to yourself, yes, but everyone's leaving. Everyone's leaving. Every time I look away, it's because I'm checking the time, because I know that people are going to come. It's going to be a party in a couple of minutes. A few years ago, I was watching a stand-up comedian who was very funny, talking about people who want to ride out hurricanes, in spite of the warnings, in spite of the pleadings, in spite of you can shelter here, lock all your stuff. No, 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 I'm going to ride out the storm. And this comedian said something so funny and so true, I've never forgotten it. The comedian said, the problem is not that the wind is blowing. The problem is what the wind is blowing. If you get hit by an RV traveling 300 miles an hour, carried by the wind, bye-bye house, really. Bye-bye everything. Oh my God, it hit the car. Yes. If a cow falls out of the sky because the cow was being blown from the neighboring farm and it lands in your pool, so many things that we've come to rely on are based on the prevailing winds. And when the winds shift, the tide turns. Vikings have known this forever. And when the tide turns, you have to be ready to go that way. It's just the nature of the beast, right? Okay, we're coming up on 10:15. I'm so excited about this. You ready? I don't know how long, if we can count it down, you and I. I have this I want to talk about today. And I have this that I want to talk about today. It's so exciting. Well, look, would you look at the time? It's 10:15. And those of you who have found your way to the screen are sitting here watching, and I am so, so delighted to see you. Thank you for coming. I also want to say, before I start saying something, relevant today, is that I'm literally blown away by the numbers of people who are watching these little videos. I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect hundreds and hundreds. I really didn't. And if you're liking and telling your friends, sharing it with your friends, there'll be more. And if you're going over to the YouTube channel that I've created, in spite of overwhelming odds given me in technology, and you subscribe, then we can build a little community of people like us. And the reason that's important is that I'm going to be reading my stuff over on the YouTube channel, and I want you to be there when that happens. So, 2 books. Vicarious was a book I wrote to let people know what it's like to be somebody like me. And my closest companion throughout my entire life really is the little voice, my inner child. My, are you really sure you should be eating all that? Alter ego. And so my alter ego plays a starring role in this book. And so you get to hear me, and you get to hear the other me. And it gives you a sense of the mental dilemma that I deal with, awake and asleep every day. What I want to talk to you about today, kind of these books, mostly this, is expectations. Our expectations, I think, are formed by, essentially, the prevailing winds in our lives. I was chatting with a few people just before we started today about the fact that you see a tree maybe alongside a river or near the ocean, and the trees are all leaning one way. All the branches are leaning one way. And the reason for that, of course, is the impact of the wind, the effect of the wind, because the wind always comes from one direction, and the tree grows up leaning from the force of the wind. if we think about that in terms of the way people think, and we grow up with certain things that we think are forever and permanent, that's our prevailing way of thinking. That's the filter we look at life through. I was always raised to believe that it was important to respect people older than me because they'd been here longer. They'd paid more dues. And with any luck, they'd learned a thing or two. And so it wasn't appropriate to dismiss them. It was appropriate to respect them automatically until they proved unworthy of that respect. So I've always been very respectful of teachers and people who have positions of authority, government, first responders, all of that, because that was my prevailing wind. On the topic of fame, what I've said repeatedly to anyone who will listen is that once somebody becomes famous for something, we forget that they're just a person. We buy into the prevailing belief that that famous person is somehow magically bigger, magically more gifted, more important, more wise. It's not true. It's not true. But we think so because they're famous, because clearly they've paid more dues. Clearly they have seniority. Clearly they have recognition. We should therefore assume that they know what they're doing. And this is not always true. Most of the time, they're winging it. And the story I want to tell you illustrates that. When I was, I guess it was 9th grade, and we had been posted to this new place. And yet again, I was going through the dilemma of, where's my house, where's the school, where's my locker, what do I do, what is that, why is the bell ringing, where am I supposed to go? Again, not for the first time. That's my prevailing wind. Does Abby have any idea? No, that's the prevailing wind. And then in one of the first English classes, we were told that we were all going to have to write a little speech, and the person who had the best speech would present it in front of the entire school. And the thud that the class heard after the teacher said that was me falling backwards off my desk. Not deliberately, although with any luck, if I had a concussion, they wouldn't make me do it. And I stalled as long as I could for months. And eventually, I was the lone holdout. And I didn't know what to write. My mind was blank. I was horrified and terrified. I could barely find the classroom. The prospect of standing up in front of all these kids was just devastating. So I asked my dad if he could help me, and he said, sure, I'll talk to your teacher. What I forgot was that my father was terrifying. When my father looked at you with a clear eye and said, do we have a problem? The answer was, no. We also have no IQ anymore because we're terrified. And I didn't realize that he had terrified the teacher. I had no idea. I should have. So when it was time for me to give the speech, because of course I still had to give the speech, but my father thought it would be better if I got to see everybody else speak, then I wouldn't be as frightened. So he had arranged for me to speak last. Fine. So the teacher is up there. The teacher has spoken to my father. The teacher knows me, knows my name, knows my father's name. And to my everlasting horror, he blew it. He had given me all kinds of good instructions before. If you're nervous, write everything down on little 3x5 cards. Memorize it, but then if you have a problem, you'll have the cards. Do this, do this, do this, take a deep breath, blah, blah, blah. He had done all the right things. However, when the time came to introduce me, terror of my father, I guess, kicked in. And he got my name wrong. He got my first name wrong. He got my first name wrong. And then he got my last name wrong. And then he said, oh, well, never mind, dear, come up anyway. And he hadn't done that with anybody else. And I was terrified and mortified and traumatized and everything. And my father had once told me that if you're going to attack anything, attack it at full speed, much as he had told me on the tennis court, go, go, go. So when the teacher said, never mind, dear, come up anyway, I ran up the steps to the stage from the wing, as if the hounds of hell were behind me. And I was going, 137 miles an hour, when at the top, I caught my toe on the lip of the top step. And I sailed through the air, leaving the ground, sailed through the air, and then, having described the perfect arc, I hit the stage like a dying oak. And all my 3x5 cards went across the stage in front of me. And I was lying there. Fortunately, I had broken my fall. I hadn't broken my wrists or my elbows or my chin. I had broken my fall, so the wind wasn't sucked out of me, but I was nonplussed. There's the word. I leapt up and I looked at the audience. All the deer in the headlights learned that trick from me, and looked around, and all the 3x5 cards were so collectible. Yes, so I collected them, and I kept looking at the audience and smiling, hopefully, at them, and collecting the cards and collecting the cards. And I turned around and I stood there and I started the speech. And the audience was already laughing. The audience had started laughing when I sailed through the air. No one else had made an entrance like that. No one else had used a hidden trampoline. Only me. I was the closing act. Sail through the air. Woof! Cards. Smiling at the audience, picking up the cards, smiling at the audience, turning around and saying, I'm being the new kid in town. Because that's what the speech was about. Because it was the only thing I knew. And the audience collectively wet its pants. It laughed so hard. Because, ironic, every single physical thing I had done, including enduring the teacher getting my name wrong, looked like an illustration of being the new kid in town. And everything I talked about was all of that. Can't find my locker, can't find the door, walk through the glass partition, almost but not quite break my nose. Everything, every single thing I had listed, I was bringing to life on the stage. And the audience was dying. They thought I was a genius. And when I reached the place during the script where I had forgotten the next thing, because that was inevitable. It was, a 2-minute speech. And it was inevitable that I was going to lose my place. I looked down at my cards. The teacher had said, the cards will save you. I looked down at the card. The card was card number 18, and it was upside down. Because collecting the cards, no time to sort and check. No. Racing, go, to be perfect for that audience. Because in my head, the prevailing wind was, they expect you to be on. Okay, and all the gods were conspiring to prevent me from being on. And I was going to win. When I reached the point and I looked down at card number 18 and I looked up and I said, it's card number 18. I don't know where I am. And some helpful soul called out the name of the school. And then they all lost it again. It was my very first public train wreck. And I knew two things. I knew that I didn't see it coming. I knew that, to my knowledge, I was not standing in a tunnel. I knew that I had followed all the steps. But I had counted on one thing. I had counted on that teacher being wise. Because he wasn't Mr. whatever his name was. He was the teacher. He was famous. He had wisdom beyond mine, and all I had to do was follow him, because he was my prevailing wind. What I hadn't realized, as I said, was that Tornado Dad had messed with that poor man's head the day before. And I think it's probably a wonder that he was able to drive to the school in one piece. I think it's a wonder that he was able to get up on the stage. Because can you imagine? I was the last one. He probably lived in terror through every other little child who got up and stood there and read woodenly about their favorite duck or something. Because he was waiting for the hounds of hell. He was probably scanning the room to see if my dad had taken off work to be there. And I didn't know that. No one knew that. No one knew what he was going through. No one knew what I was going through until I was actually going through it. And then it was, I think, abundantly clear what I was going through. And so the reason I share that story with you is because we're all dealing with some prevailing wind stuff. It's not that the wind is blowing. It's what the wind is blowing. And you can decide all you like that you're not going to stay indoors with the windows closed, because you don't have to. You're going to be fine. But you don't know what's coming. You have no idea. You're basing all your decisions on what used to be, on those prevailing winds, not this one. The most important thing we can ever tell ourselves and then remember is that everyone needs to be at the rehearsal to know how it's supposed to turn out. If I go to the rehearsal and I come away convinced that I've got this, I know my lines, I know what's coming next, I have to stop and ask myself, was the audience at the rehearsal? Was the stage man at the rehearsal? Was the delivery guy at the rehearsal, the one who parked his truck right outside with the engine running? Was the lightning storm that blew out all the lights at the rehearsal? Probably not. Does that mean that I'm living in a dream world? Pretty much. Does it mean my ego is getting in the way? Pretty much. Does it mean that we're all kind of guessing? Definitely. Does it mean that just because it's a prevailing wind, that it's never going to change? Absolutely not. Prevailing winds have a habit of turning around on you. Ask any Viking. Ask any military kid. Ask anyone who thought they knew how it was going to come out. And then see if you can remember it. I hope you're all well after these storms. I hope you're doing okay. Please like what you saw. Share it with your friends. Go over to YouTube and subscribe. And I'll see you back here on Thursday. Thank you so much for spending the time. Bye-bye.